Before we start, make sure you subscribe and like this video. I don't know who returned from space, but they aren't the NASA astronauts we sent. You may think you know this space agency, but you don't. NASA is not the sum of its publicly presented parts. I'm not simply talking about classified research and development. I'm talking about the dozens of space programs veiled from prying eyes, programs hidden even from many folk within the company. And when I was finally offered the privilege of peering behind the curtain, I found myself at the eye of an unprecedented storm, a disaster beyond the bounds of earthly horror, the GE-1 mission. Since the climax of the space race, a consensus has grown, a prevailing belief that NASA has abandoned the final frontier. It is, however, an absurd notion that the brightest minds of this agency no longer care about space's mysteries. The truth is that our best scientists decided decades ago to shield humanity from the hellish things we uncovered. Things lying in the pits of space that no light reaches. NASA projects featured in the media have low stakes. Even the International Space Station sits at the foot of this organization's priorities. Significant expeditions are classified, the ones intended to catapult humanity towards the stars, for instance, the ones using spacecraft beyond what the average person deems possible with human technology. We are capable of things that would leave you awestruck. We are capable of things that would leave you cold. The GE-1 spacecraft launched on Wednesday, the 25th of January, 2023. It sailed beyond our solar system, pursuing a slow signal that was coursing through the outer reaches of the Milky Way. Not an intelligible transmission, but a frequency that intrigued us nonetheless. A frequency named 784A. Hysteria swept the company on the date of the signal's first interception, Saturday, the 29th of October, 2022. Given 784A's ever-moving source, the frequency sparked feverish intrigue. Regarding the nature of the mysterious moving signal, there seemed to be a different hypothesis from every NASA employee with clearance. It was truly an exhilarating time, and things reached a fever pitch when the GE-1 craft launched a few months later. Employees weren't eating or sleeping. They spent their waking hours sharing ideas about the mysterious transmission from space, a circuit board of explanations that finally overloaded on Thursday, the 2nd of February, 2023, the day on which the GE-1 stopped responding to NASA. 1 week later, on Thursday, the 9th of February, the signal from the spacecraft returned. Commander Irwin, this is Mission Control. Dr. Parker, the head of the project, announced. Mission Control to GE-1. Do you copy? Roger, Mission Control. Commander Tim Irwin responded. We've been trying to reach you. We lost contact with GE-1 7 days ago, Commander. What happened? What is your status? Dr. Parker asked. All systems are fine, Mission Control, Irwin replied. Dr. Parker seemed flustered by the commander's nonchalant demeanor. The project leader clawed at his gray, thinning hair with tense fingers. The old man seemed to be carefully considering his next utterance. 7 days without contact, Commander. 7. GE-1 disappeared at our end. Do you have a status report? Anything which might explain why we were unable to communicate with one another? Parker asked. Nothing, Mission Control, Irwin blankly replied. As for 784A, we reached the transmission point of the signal. There was nothing to be found. We have collected as much data as possible. requesting clearance to return home. There were several minutes of nervous mumbling from various scientists and board members. Dr. Parker looked broken beyond measure by the time he leaned forwards, heavy breath beating against the microphone. He was trembling with a mixture of rage and confusion. "Roger, Commander Irwin, you have clearance to come home," Parked croakily whispered. On a vessel traversing space at an unfathomable pace, the astronauts returned home. The craft silently landed at an unofficial NASA site on Wednesday the 15th of February, 2023. The GE-1 crew emerged, greeted by a small applauding crowd. Tim Irwin, Gianna Danes, and Matthias Olsson. Those were the three astronauts who supposedly emerged from the spacecraft. And at first, we had no reason to believe anything else. We recognized the three faces, the three voices, the three brilliant minds. However, it did not take long for slight oddities to slip through the cracks. I overheard something perplexing whilst Tim Irwin spoke to his wife, Melissa Irwin, in the break room. "I love you, Melody," the astronaut said. Melissa frowned, smiling awkwardly. "Melody? Who is Melody?" I didn't intend to eavesdrop. I had been helping myself to a drink. Still, I slowed down when I heard that. Melissa was clearly teasing her exhausted husband, but there was a slight tinge of uncertainty in her voice, and I'll admit that I was a little too nosy. I pretended to weigh up 2 different drinks before I made my way out of the room. As a result, I managed to catch the tail end of the commander's strange fumble. Irwin cleared his throat. I'm sorry, honey. I forgot my wife's name," Melissa laughed, finishing his sentence. "No worries, honey. It's Melissa, by the way. Just to let you know. I didn't realize I had to worry about you finding another woman in space." "I know your name," Tim icily sliced. I froze, halfway out of the door, as Melissa replied with a timid voice. "Sorry, sweetie. I know. I was only joking," she assured. "Your head must be all over the place. You look like you need a good rest." I laughed to myself once I was out of earshot, but I felt the same as Melissa. Something was slightly uneven about Tim's disposition. It wasn't simply a sleep-deprived brain. I knew that, and she knew that. The commander's voice changed when his wife confronted him. It didn't sound like the astronaut any longer. I didn't know Tim incredibly well, but I knew that he was different. Whatever the case, I would have forgotten about the entire thing, dismissing my gut feeling as the result of a nerve-wracking week or two. Everybody had been unsettled since GE-1 lost its signal. We were still recovering from the stress of those awful 7 days without any communication with the spacecraft. There is one other thing worth mentioning from the day of GE-1's return. One of my co-workers claimed to find Gianna Danes standing alone in a corridor, staring at a bathroom door, not entering, not moving. Sleep deprivation, I thought again. 1 year later, that explanation no longer sufficed. On Wednesday, the 31st of January, 2024, an unidentified object entered Earth's atmosphere, tumbling into the Pacific Ocean. A catastrophe that was only brought to NASA's attention because the object in question utilized advanced cloaking technology, though it did not broadcast a signal. It was a government satellite that detected the craft, and when specialists identified that they had detected technology used by Dozen Minus, our primary government contractor, NASA immediately sent a recovery team to the ocean site. That was as much as I knew until Dr. Parker knocked on my door. "I'd appreciate your input," he said. "Pardon?" I replied, fearing for a moment that I'd have to join the exploration team. You're one of only 24 people who were involved with the GE1 project, Parker explained, as if that were enough information. I don't understand. That project ended a year ago, I said. Dr. Parker's brow furrowed. Please come with me, Dr. Odell. And then after following the man to the control room, I learned something which my brain, usually eager to embrace the unknown, wanted so desperately to unlearn. On the ocean floor, thousands of feet below the water surface, NASA found the GE-1 spacecraft. What? I gasped. We don't know, Dr. Parker replied. I need your help though. Why? I weakly asked. I don't understand any of this. The GE-1 is sitting in a hangar, isn't it? Yes, Dr. Parker nodded. But it's also sitting at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean, 3,000 miles off the East Coast. My face whitened and the man nodded. Take your time to process that, he said. I'm still working on wrapping my head around it. After a minute or so, I finally summoned a question that I didn't find utterly foolish or uneducated. It's the exact same spacecraft, identical in every way, I asked. The project leader sighed. Well, yes and no. Why am I here, Dr. Parker? I asked. The recovery team has not explored the craft yet, the man replied. But we have conducted a preliminary exploration with an unmanned vessel. UV-7. Movement was detected within the craft. Christ, I gasped. Parker continued. It's unsettling. The room is divided. Some specialists think a living organism might be down there, but others think it may have been a dislodged piece of equipment. The UV-7 didn't transmit any biological information. Anyway, that's why I wanted to bring you into the room. You're one of this organization's leading biologists, after all. I scoffed. I specialize in cell and molecular biology. This is... well, what is this? What have we even found here? Nothing, Parker said. That's my verdict, but Dr. Long disagrees. I mentioned your name to them, and I'm hoping you'll help me. How? I asked. By proving what the UV-7 has already told us, he answered. Whatever moved down there, it wasn't living. It wasn't organic in nature, unless a fish happened to. No, it couldn't have been. As I said, the UV-7 would have detected a biological signal. I agreed to offer my opinion. I shouldn't have done so, but I did. It would have been easy to ask Dr. Parker to choose someone else. Give someone else clearance. I wasn't exactly emotionally invested in the GE-1 program. It had been a year since the astronauts supposedly returned, and we'd found nothing at the source of the 784A frequency. Since then, I'd moved on to bigger and better things. Of course, everything changed when Parker revealed that an identical version of the GE-1 spacecraft existed at the bottom of the ocean. It was a discovery far beyond anything I'd experienced during 13 years at NASA. I needed an answer to the unknown. 2 hours later, with no more than 20 people in the control room, we watched live footage of the submarine's dive towards the GE-1 crash site. The mission was a joint venture between NASA and a privately contracted company, with all participating crew members legally bound to an NDA. After all, they were about to explore a spacecraft which, in the public realm, did not exist. After the initial flurry of breathtaking aquatic species, it took another 2 torturous hours for the video feed to display anything other than blackness. The vessel descended into the depths of the ocean, the part that light didn't reach. I thought about its similarity to space. I found it ridiculous to think about the fact that we have ignored a frontier on our own planet before exploring the one beyond it. So much of the ocean remains unexplored. Eventually, the contractors found the wreckage, and 2 divers, each fitted with a camera, left the submarine to explore the vessel. When they rounded the battered nose of the spacecraft, Mission Control fell silent. We all saw it at the same time. The bold letters printed on the crumpled wreckage of the sunken craft, which was half buried in the Black Sea bed. GE-1. Hearing about the discovery was one thing. Seeing it on a gargantuan screen was something else. Dr. Parker was no liar. I knew that, but I still didn't believe him until I saw the footage for myself. Breaching the airlock now, the lead diver Barton announced. Disturbed water swirled into a stream of bubbles, clouding the lens of Barton's camera as he used a piece of specialized drilling equipment. It was a long and arduous process, during which Mission Control only had a limited view of the spectacle through the camera of Lee, the second diver. "That'll do it," Barton's colleague said. The bubbles started to disperse as the drill ceased, and we watched the 2 explorers break the airlock's mechanism before pulling the hatch towards them. They revealed a void within the opening, and the lights on their headsets did very little to illuminate the innards of the craft. I sensed that the 2 men were apprehensive about entering the wreckage. They likely knew very little about NASA's GE-1 program. That, in the end, was for the best. We all long for that privilege. Entering the vehicle, Barton uneasily said. The lead diver swam through the opening, followed a couple of seconds later by Lee, who may well have been on the verge of turning and retreating to the submarine. The split screen revealed 2 pieces of footage, barely different in perspective. 2 views of the same bleak, water-filled tunnel. The entrance to a vessel that had once traversed space, only to meet its end in a watery grave. "Are we broadcasting clear footage?" Lee asked. "Yes," Dr. Parker responded. "If you follow the main hallway, you'll reach GE-1's flight deck." "Not seeing any obstructions," Barton said. "Should be manageable." The pair continued to swim through the hallway of the craft, which, as Barton had noted, was remarkably intact. None of the carnage and chaos we'd expected to find. Then again, we shouldn't have been surprised. There were minimal tears in the exterior of the craft. Given the level of investment placed into developing a vessel far beyond mankind's perceived capabilities, it seemed plausible that the craft had mostly survived both a dangerous re-entry and a high-speed collision with the water. What did not seem plausible was Parker's explanation that we were looking at a carbon copy of an existing spacecraft, one which I had watched land on Earth a year earlier. I had no reason to believe that everybody in the room had to be lying to me, but something in my brain refused to compute such an impossibility. I wouldn't have ever believed Dr. Parker, even if I'd gone to the hangar and physically seen the craft in person before swimming to the bottom of the ocean to view its twin. Even after everything I've seen, I still try hard not to believe any of it. "Oh, Jesus!" Barton cried. It only took a second for the camera to reveal what the diver had seen, the hellish scene that had sparked such a haunted response, and I unleashed a similar yelp of terror. We all recoiled fearfully, in fact. I suppose none of us had hypothesized what we might find in the wreckage, even when the debate about movement and biological signatures had raged. There was no joyous hysteria. This was not like those early days of the GE-1 project. Nobody seemed exuberant to find 3 floating spacesuits at the front of the spacecraft. Spacesuits that were not empty. Spacesuits that were, surprisingly, intact. It had taken roughly a day or so since the GE-1 crash for the divers to breach the vessel. 24 hours for the bodies to decompose underwater. The skin of each astronaut was discolored and wounded with haunting, razor-thin gashes, but their gaunt faces were unmistakable. The 2 men and 1 woman, each wearing a scream to the grave, were the 3 astronauts who had returned to Earth 1 year earlier. Worst of all was the corpse of Commander Tim Irwin. The upper half of his helmet and the head within had been cleanly severed above his gaping mouth. That explained the rotten nature of his remaining lower half in comparison to Dianes and Olsen, who were each encased in a suit without oxygen. The ship's oxygen would have lasted at least a month or so, resulting in partial decay of Irwin's remaining face, exposed by the savagely sawn helmet. The lower half of his face bore holes in the cheeks, revealing teeth behind. One scientist murmured that the 3 scientists may have died long before impact. Within a sealed spacesuit, lacking oxygen, the decomposition process would be slowed. Of course, that only raised more terrified questions. One in particular played on my mind. Why were the astronauts wearing suits inside the spacecraft? A technical engineer gave a probable explanation for the ship's return. The GE-1 was programmed with a homing initiative. In the event of life loss or 24 hours without manual piloting, the craft's motherboard was programmed to assume automatic control of GE-1 and steer it back to Earth. The re-entry might have failed because the ship was damaged. That might also explain why we didn't receive a signal from its transmitter. Honestly, it's a miracle that the GE-1 made it back to Earth at all, the engineer said. We'll know more when we look at the ship's log, another engineer added. Dr. Parker sighed. Barton, we need you to. We have to get out of here, Lee yelled, shouting over Dr. Parker. I didn't sign up for this. Look, we did the dive. You've seen what you needed to see. I understand that this is a terrible situation, Parker continued. You were, however, briefed. You signed a contract, Mr. Lee. The nature of the expedition was made clear to you, and we don't have all of the information that we need. We need you to recover as much of the ship's data as possible. Do you have the drive? Yes, Barton murmured, dazed by the 3 floating corpses. Right, Parker replied. You should see the socket on the right-hand side. The lead diver swam towards the main console, searching anxiously with the navigational assistance of every expert in the room. When he finally inserted the drive into the designated socket, a red light flickered beside it. What does that mean? Barton asked. You were right, Ian, one of the technical engineers said to his colleague. It's not good, Mr. Barton. It means that some of the ship's log files are corrupted. All of them? Dr. Parker asked. The engineer rubbed his chin. Well, if there'd been no light at all, this would have been a lost cause. So, there's still hope. It'll be the water damage. No doubt about that. Just leave the drive in the socket, Mr. Barton. Let it run. When the light turns off, that means the data transfer has finished. Meanwhile, Lee was scanning the ship with equipment for detecting organic matter. I was standing by, waiting for the diver's device to detect some sign of life. Something that would warrant me being in the room. But there was nothing. Not even any sign of the movement that the UV-7 had detected. I was the uncomfortable biologist in the corner, only there, it seemed, to endure the horror alongside everyone else. Something that did intrigue Mission Control, however, was Leeds' discovery of floating glass shards in Danes' laboratory. Most people wouldn't pay attention to suspended glass fragments in an underwater wreckage. The divers certainly didn't understand the commotion from the scientists, and neither did I. But Lee indulged Dr. Parker when he was instructed to collect a sample. "It's just broken glass," I naively thought, frowning. 10 minutes later, when the data transfer completed, Barton recovered the drive, and the two divers were beyond happy to receive the go-ahead from Dr. Parker to leave the site. The men returned to the submarine, the transmission ended, and everybody in the control room dispersed. I didn't sleep that night, of course. No sane person would manage a good night's sleep after such an awful discovery. When I went into work that morning, I hadn't expected to see video footage of 3 dead astronauts. More terrifying than that, I hadn't expected to see footage of 3 corpses who I'd seen return to Earth, alive and well. "Earl?" Dr. Parker half barked. I was sitting in my office, boring into the wall with a 1,000-yard stare. It took the man 3 attempts to catch my attention. Using my first name had triggered something in my brain, taken me out of myself for a moment, reminded me that this was all real. No matter how hard I tried to dissociate and detach myself, I was excruciatingly intertwined with the horror. "Dr. Parker," I replied, unable to say anything else. "I'm afraid I have to ask you, once again, to come with me," the man said, seeming far paler than usual. "We just reviewed the data from the GE-1 wreckage." "What did you find?" I whispered, voice breaking. Parker sighed. "If you come to my office, you'll see. I really need your opinion." That seemed like a lie to me. Dr. Parker had been talking about the importance of my opinion as a biologist since the start of the GE-1 program. In the end, I'd simply been a limp, lifeless limb, hardly even a backup appendage, just some excess fat that somebody had forgotten to trim. As it would transpire, however, Dr. Parker had finally found something that required my input. Out of 102 audio files on the drive, only 2 were uncorrupted. 2 recordings from Commander Tim Irwin. Within those recordings, Dr. Parker heard something he didn't understand. Heard many things he didn't understand. Unfortunately, I scarcely understood the recordings either. What little I did understand, however, horrified me, and I saw that coming. It was foreshadowed by the project leader, by his haunted eyes. The board need to know whether they've found something alien in nature, Dr. Odell. I still don't think it's not organic. I don't believe that. They won't listen to me, Dr. Parker said, but they'll listen to you. I could tell that the man no longer believed his own words. He wanted me to prove him wrong. File 86. This is Commander Tim Irwin. I'm recording this message at 1440 on Thursday, 2 * and February 2023, Greenwich Mean Time. Since 12:15 today, we have been unable to contact Mission Control. Olsen has not pinpointed any malfunction, so we hope that all remains well back home. The 3 of us are contemplating the possibility that the issue with our broadcasting signal stems from what we have discovered, the source of the 784 of frequency. We found it. And given what we have experienced over the past 2 hours, I believe it to be vital for me to record our findings in the absence of any communication with Dr. Parker. At roughly 12:35, shortly after losing contact with home, we finally saw a physical manifestation of the frequency that we've been hunting for 8 days. We were starting to think there would be nothing there. We had been eyeing blackness for hours, believing that the transmission had no visible source. It was when we neared a mile or less from the signal source that we finally saw something tangible. I'm still struggling to describe our discovery. Well, at first, we didn't know how to put it into words. Now, however, I suppose I'd say that we were pursuing an ever-moving belt of glass shards. Yes, glass shards. You heard me correctly. Thousands of small glass-like fragments hurtling through the cosmos, jagged pieces of some unknown material. No sign of biological life. No sign of foreign technology. Just a near-transparent substance with no technological or organic nature, somehow transmitting the 784 frequency. That revelation might disappoint some people back home, those hoping for signs of alien life. Still, I know that Dr. Parker and other minds behind this mission will be extremely fascinated by this discovery. At 12:55, after a brief preparation period, we used the B-1 craft to retrieve a sample of glass from the moving belt. I understand that, though we were cleared to use the equipment without approval, Dr. Parker may be a little disheartened. I know he wanted to experience this with us. I just hope he'll understand. We didn't want to wait for the line of communication to reopen. After all, we didn't know whether we'd have another opportunity. We had no way of knowing how the mysterious belt of glass would react to our presence, even though GE-1 still wasn't picking up organic or electronic signatures. Diane's keeps talking about the possibility of something sentient lurking in the shards. Until we detect something organic, I doubt that. The belt was, and still is, moving at a rather glacial pace of roughly 6,000 miles per hour. We will have no trouble pursuing it in the GE-1. As I speak, we are trundling alongside the glass stream at a crawl. It stretches for hundreds of miles. Who knows how many shards are contained within the stream? With regards to recovering glass pieces from the belt, the BE-1 craft suffered catastrophic damage, which intrigued us. No form of glass on Earth would be powerful enough, even at such a speed, to tear through the B-1's reinforced hull. That only confirmed what we already knew. This isn't glass. It isn't anything we understand. Upon realizing that, we knew we had to retrieve a sample, regardless of the damage to B-1. The small craft only managed to collect a meager handful of passing shards, but that was enough. We didn't want to push our luck, so we brought it back within a matter of minutes. I'll send over the data logs as soon as the communication is fixed. You'll see what I mean. The miniature vessel was almost obliterated by the belt, and we didn't want to lose an opportunity to claim at least something. At 13:20, Dr. Gianna Dianes examined the 7 shards recovered by the B-1 craft in her laboratory. She instructed Olsen and I to wear protective gear before joining her, as she had no idea exactly what we'd found. We giddily watched Diane's conduct her tests. She was giddy too, in all honesty, though she attempted to maintain a professional composure. We're aware, whatever we've retrieved, that it is unlike anything humanity has seen before. Dr. Dianes confirmed, around 1420, what we'd seen in GE-1's data. The shards do not contain organic matter. Each piece is composed of raw material not present on Earth or any other planet we've ever explored. Shortly before I started this recording, however, Olsen became a little jittery. He told Dianes and me that he saw one of the shards enlarge, or at least move in some form. It was likely a trick of the lighting, of course. Diane's took him seriously, but she found no evidence of any change in the material. I suggested that moving forwards, we set up cameras to record the laboratory. Diane's and Olsen agreed. That'll ensure we don't miss anything. I'll send everything to Mission Control as soon as Olsen has figured out how to fix the transmitter, though he assures me that it remains unbroken. Bizarre. Anyway, interference from the 784 of frequency seems to be the most likely explanation, but we're still unsure. I will continue to log daily updates. For now, the three of us need to get some rest. It's been a historic day, but we're shattered. None of us have slept in over a day. This is Commander Tim Irwin. Audio file 86. Terminating recording at 1450. I need you to brace yourself, Dr. Parker said. I snapped back into reality, having been fully immersed in the wonder of the crew's discovery. Much like Commander Irwin, I'd almost forgotten the gravity of the situation, forgotten the terror that NASA had found at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean. Brace myself for what? The next audio file? I asked. Dr. Parker nodded. We just listened to 86. The only other uncorrupted recording is 99. So, we're missing 12 files in between those? I asked. Yes, he answered, and 3 files after 99. The board doesn't care about the first 85 audio files. The ones before we lost contact with GE-1. Meaningless updates that would likely mirror whatever Commander Irwin was telling Mission Control on a daily basis. But the audio recordings from 86 to 102 detail whatever happened after the vessel went dark. Those are, perhaps, the most valuable pieces of data this organization currently possesses. Right. Is file 99 useful? I asked. The doctor's lip quivered as he hovered his unsteady index finger over the mouse, contemplating whether to inflict such horror upon me. I wish he hadn't. Useful? That's an interesting word. I don't know, Dr. Odell. It tells one horrifying part of a story we don't understand, Parker croaked before clicking. File 99. This is Irwin, 99. File 99. Since the last few recordings, it's all over, and things were already terrible. This must be my 5th recording today. I'm sorry. Sorry for the backlog of files, for you too. Oh, who cares? Why am I apologizing to anyone? Nobody's there. Nobody will ever be there. I'll be lost to space, and, well, I hope somebody hears it. There's the protocol after all. The return protocol. I'm no engineer, but I remember Olsen talking about it. If GE-1 makes it back to Earth, I hope these recordings make sense to you. Whoever's listening, none of this makes sense to me. And it's even worse now Diane's is gone. She died at, I don't know, 2210 perhaps. Fuck. It's Tuesday 7 the February, 2240. I'm the only surviving member of the GE-1 crew. You know how it happened. I just want her family to know that I tried to save her. Oh God. This all started with a reckless endeavor. We should have turned around when we saw the vessel outside the window. It's still there. I'm looking at it now. GE-1. An identical version of our spacecraft, eyeballing me from the belt, impervious to the racing current of glass. You know what? I'd like to amend my statement. We should have turned around as soon as we lost contact with Mission Control. This was written on the wall. Everything about the belt was wrong. We knew it, but we were drooling from our mouths like apes. Olsen's idea was smart. It was smart. It just wasn't enough. We should have thought about B1, thought about how the glass tore through it. Olsen promised, however, that this would be different. The belt was moving so quickly, after all. He said, we wanted to believe him. Maybe I still want to believe him. After all, I'm wearing my suit, even though I know it didn't save him. And it didn't save Diane's either. I spent most of the day trying to stop the bleeding, but it was awful. You heard it. You don't need me to tell you. I still hear her words, ringing in my ears, the things she described, the way it cut into her skin, and then disappeared. The glass disappeared after hacking her face to pieces. It was so methodical and quick, so eerily quick, but not in a merciful way. Her dying scream will never leave my mind. Neither will the sight of that sharp shard, unbound by the laws of physics, slicing her face with clean, swift motions, a weapon wielded by an unseen force. I've locked the lab. That won't be enough, will it? It wasn't enough to stop. Oh, there it goes. That's why I wanted to record this. I keep seeing something in the copied version of the GE-1 spacecraft, gliding 100 yards away from the real one. I keep seeing movement behind the windows. Oh God, no, there's no God, not in the... I see them so clearly now, but they're dead. Olsen and Diane's are dead. Their bodies are still sitting in the control room. I'm looking at them, and they're across the way, surveying me from the flight deck of the copied craft. What is happening? What is this? They won't stop looking at me. They won't stop. I want to turn around. I want to stop following the belt. I've wanted to abandon the mission for days, but Diana's made a good point. After Olsen passed, she said that we shouldn't head back with the shards on board. We were just too frightened to go near the glass after he died. Without Dianis, I don't see myself solving this. I just have to soldier onwards, keep tracking things, keep moving. I'll record an update tomorrow, but I won't abandon this mission, not until I talk to somebody from Mission Control. Whatever material we found, I don't think I should come home unless I get rid of it. So wait, do you hear that? That's what I heard before, when it happened to Diane's, when the glass moved, changed into something, I don't know. It looked like liquid, like a thin trail of water with a slight sheen. It crawled across the walls before climbing her suit and somehow slithering beneath the visor. I don't know how it entered, and then it started solidifying. She was running around, screaming, wrestling with her own helmet. Give me a second. I need to check the lab. Yes, there are fewer pieces of glass. That's the other thing. 4. There are only 4 shards. We collected 7 from the belt. There were definitely 7, then 6, after the mirrored version of the GE-1 craft appeared outside the window. 5, after we found Olsen's body in the airlock. 4, after it took Diane's. Wait, no. There were 4 after Diane's died, at 22:10. It's 22:43, and I only see 3 shards in there, sitting on her desk, but the door's locked. There's no sign of exit. Where did the 4th one go? Where did it fucking go? God fucking damn it. I don't know how much longer I'll be able to wait. I want to come home more than anything. See Melissa, see the little ones. But that's exactly why I won't come back. It would be selfish. It wouldn't be right to let them live on an Earth with the risk of these shards. Stop looking at me, both of you. Stop it. What are you? You're not them. They're dead. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for recording all of this. It would have been better not to know, wouldn't it? It would have been better not to know. Commander Tim Irwin. Audio file 99. Terminating a recording at 22:45. After the audio ended, Dr. Parker and I sat quietly, not silently. I could hear my own heartbeat in the quaking canals of my ears. I could hear the project leader hyperventilating, failing to hide a fearful murmur that sounded at the back of his throat. He'd already heard the two files, of course. I had no idea how he could manage to maintain any semblance of professionalism. He knew what was coming. He knew what I was about to hear. But he said nothing, did nothing. I was crumbling from the haunting revelations in the last surviving recording of Commander Irwin. I hated Dr. Parker for involving me in the GE-1 program. Think about what we saw, the man eventually whispered. I looked at him without uttering a word, giving the scientist time to continue. Think about the body of Tim Irwin, Parker explained. What remained of it? I need more than anything in the world to hear file 102. The commander's final recording on Friday, the 17th of February, 2023. That was after the GE-1 landed, I said. He shuddered. It wasn't the GE-1, Dr. Odell. You know that now. I'm thinking about the shards recovered from the wreckage. What happened to those? I asked, gripped by a fresh wave of terror. Dr. Parker lowered his head. Scientists are examining the fragments. Dr. Zeeland's team. Now you've listened to the audio files. I'd like you to lend your expertise in his laboratory. Right. Well, I've remembered something else, I said. The video footage from the dive. Do you remember seeing the glass in GE-1's laboratory? I've hardly thought of anything else, he replied. Commander Irwin said in the final uncorrupted recording that only 3 shards remained, but there were more than 3 shards in that water. I quivered. Parker frowned. I don't know what to say to that, Earl. The shards could have shattered during the crash, split into numerous smaller fragments. I didn't believe that, not from the description the commander had given. These were sturdy, unnatural things which could change shape and state, not things that would shatter. Anyway, Dr. Odell, the scientist muttered, clearing his throat. Before we go to Zeeland's lab, I'd like to ask for your opinion. G1 found no evidence of organic matter in the belt. Dr. Gianna Dionis found no evidence of organic matter in the shot samples. Given the commander's description in file 99, however, do you think that the ship's data log may have been wrong? Do you think Dr. Dionis may have been wrong? I sighed. There isn't enough evidence for me to give a definite answer to that question, Dr. Parker. Not until I see the shards for myself. I regretted saying that. I didn't want to see the shards. I wanted to run away, wash my hands of the whole thing. File 99 had filled me with a bottomless dread that I didn't realize the human body could experience. It haunted me. The thought of an unfeeling thing stealing one's form and then shredding that same person to pieces. The commander was right. It would be the worst thing imaginable for the substance to make its way back to Earth. But it was all over when the glass mimicked the spacecraft. The shards have already been here for a year. You're too late, Dr. Zeeland said. That line snapped my mind into action. I had zoned out of the earlier conversation with the scientist, still trying desperately to process the horror of the past few days. It was nearly impossible to process something far beyond our world, something the human mind has not evolved to process. Dr. Parker scoffed. Dr. Odell needs to. Dr. Odell is too late, Zealand interrupted. We disposed of the shards this morning. I beg your pardon? I asked. The fragments were dangerous. The audio recordings made that abundantly clear. Dr. Long ordered us to destroy the samples, Dr. Zealand said. At that moment, Veronica Riding emerged from the lab, which was being barricaded by Dr. Zealand's hulking form. The sheepish woman was pushing a trolley of black waste bags, and she seemed to be trying to avoid detection. Regardless, hope sparked in my mind, as Veronica was a close friend of mine, not just a colleague. I hoped she would clear up the strangeness of the situation. The idea of NASA discarding such an important historical find seemed unthinkable to me. It was a lovely thought. There's no denying that. I wanted to entertain the possibility of the agency putting mankind's safety before mankind's progression, but I'm not a moron. Veronica, I called, is it true? What was that, Dr. Odell? She asked, stopping to face me. My body temperature lowered. As I eyed the face of my dear friend, I felt the shift. I didn't see a physical difference in Veronica's appearance as such. The shift in my fractured mind was more subtle than that. It was a feeling that whisked the contents of my gut. Veronica always called me Earl. Please subscribe and like the video. Also comment your favorite horror movie so I can stay motivated to upload more videos like this.